Nintendo Switch has games.
Oh. Well, I guess I better buy it then. It's hard to believe that it's almost been 7 years since the Nintendo Switch dropped. I remember back when it was called the NX, which would have been a stupid name. What does that even mean? Might as well call it the Wii U or something. Pessimism is the god particle that permeates all of video game discussion today. I feel like gamers are exhausted, burnt out, frustrated, and feel like nobody is listening to them, and Nintendo, despite being the Wahoo Mario company, is still just another company at the end of the day. But that being said, I feel like the Switch era has been one of my favorite eras for Nintendo despite my initial skepticism, and there's always been something going on there that I like to see. I feel like everybody got something that they wanted out of this machine in the end. Not everything, but something. It wasn't perfect, the hardware was very underwhelming even when it dropped. Nintendo netcode is Nintendo netcode, Joy-Cons are Joy-Cons, but it was a very straightforward machine and Nintendo was very upfront about what you can expect out of it, and it didn't confuse casual demographics like the Wii U. And this can be chalked up to an advertising campaign that was actually slightly competent. Look, it's a handheld, but then you plug it into this thing and now it's a console. Any questions? Yeah, no good, shut up. By this point in most consoles' lifespan, the successor is usually on the horizon, which is why everybody is talking about the Switch 2 now, which we still have very little concrete information on aside from rumors and the obvious fact that it's just gotta happen eventually. But numerous analysts and journalists seem pretty confident that it's coming out, or at least getting announced later this year. Nintendo themselves suggested that they'll be continuously putting out Switch games until at least 2025, which adds a lot of credence to this idea, since console manufacturers typically have a transitional period between consoles that lasts about a year or two, before fully moving away from last-gen hardware. As exciting as that might sound, I'm a little concerned because Nintendo in the past has been known to display a pattern of arrogance where they'll be on top of the world one generation and immediately follow that up with a generation of goofy, weird mistakes that they really shouldn't be making. Just imagine how different history would have been if the N64 used CDs or if they just put a damn DVD player in the GameCube. We could have had ray-traced Waluigi's by now. If Nintendo is smart, they will definitely have learned a couple of things during the Switch era, but will they truly internalize these lessons and act on them in the new generation? Or will they go, we're Nintendo, we're built different, they'll still buy it? Which, I guess to some extent is not entirely wrong. First off, let's talk about the most obvious thing: horsepower, computing chips, graphics. Ever since the Wii, Nintendo hardware has always been roughly one console generation behind the competition, which is a sore spot that Nintendo fans have kinda just had to accept for the last 16.5 years. The trade-off is cost-effectiveness. Xbox 360 was $300 for the basic bitch model, and the PS3's basic bitch model was $500. Jesus Mario. The Nintendo Wii had one model in the beginning, and it was $250, and it came with Wii Sports. That was just a good deal, especially for all the bowling fans in the audience. Nico, it's Roman, let's play Wii Sports, cousin! It was affordable enough that everybody who heard about the big Wii fad could buy it without any regrets because they still had enough money to feed their kids afterwards. The Wii was Nintendo zigging when everybody else zagged. No HD, no DVD or CD playback, no social media integration, no multimedia shit, no big dog AAA multiplats except for Call of Duty with really bad graphics. The competition was vicious. Other platforms were cranking out obscene visuals, had far more features, and most importantly, some of the most groundbreaking titles that completely missed the Wii because it just didn't have the right stuff. I remember thinking that PS3 games were indistinguishable from real life, and despite all of this, that little chihuahua of a game console mauled it to pieces, at least as far as the sales charts were concerned. The motion controls set it apart. It was a very outside-the-box approach that made people who thought they'd seen everything turn their heads. And this is how they got away with having 500 megabytes of storage space. The Switch was never gonna blow anybody's mind with innovative control systems, especially now that people finally realized motion control is for grandmas, but it was still an outside-the-box approach because of the portability. It's a lower specs, lower price console that cannot crank out graphics like the PS5 or even the PS4, but you can't play either of those consoles on a plane. On top of all of this, for all the power that we're dumping into these new consoles, I feel like we're really starting to see diminishing returns with each passing console generation. I used to dream of graphics that looked exactly like reality, and now we're extremely close to it, and instead of being hyped, I'm just like, alright, now what? Even games that don't look particularly good are still demanding a lot of horsepower. Starfield, Steam says you need a 1070 Ti as a minimum, and it's a game where the character models look like this. Naughty Dog was hyping up this Last of Us 2 remaster where Joel has 3 extra dirt particles on his face, which was a very important subtle detail that was imperative to Neil Druckmann's original vision that the PS4 could never even hope of rendering. Wow, Joel is a man in his 50s, I never noticed before. Perhaps the game really is a masterpiece and I've just been too blind to see it because it was too constrained by the PS4. Let's talk Switch. Now the Switch is just barely powerful enough that developers who are really willing to put in the work and squeeze every little micro optimization they can out of this little tablet have been able to port a surprising number of games to the system, even stuff you wouldn't necessarily expect. Doom Eternal, Witcher 3, Wolfenstein, Nier, all of these games originally dropped for the real man consoles and all of them eventually got Switch ports. The Switch version of each of these games is obviously the worst official way to play them, but that's the price you pay for portability. However, since the Nintendo Switch came out, there have been competitors and alternatives, like the Steam Deck, which is great if you're mostly about multi-platform games like Not Bloodborne.
The portable Cleveland steamer could be taken with you into the shitter.
Even the budget versions of this thing are still far more capable than the Nintendo Switch, and if you're playing games like Bitcher or Doom, this will let you do it portably and at a substantially higher level of performance than the Switch. And if you already own them on Steam, I'm pretty sure you can just play them on the Steam Deck without buying a new copy of the game. While there definitely do exist games that look great on the current Nintendo Switch, it's definitely getting harder to ignore the very obvious cutbacks. The pop-in and detail distance on Pikmin 4 is never going to ruin that game for me, but I would love to see what it looks like on a more capable machine where those compromises are not necessary. They're definitely capable of making a more powerful portable machine. I mean, Death Stranding is running on iPhones now, right? The next Switch will obviously be more powerful than the current one, and really, any improvement on the current Switch hardware is welcome at this point. But if that thing comes out and it's not even 2/3 as powerful as a basic bitch Steam Deck at this point in the game, that would make me very sad. This thing is not going to be running Cyberpunk at 4K 60 at max settings with ray tracing. I don't really expect that from a portable console, let alone a portable Nintendo console, and I don't even necessarily need it, but it'd be nice if multiplats didn't have to turn out like this. Let's talk controllers. The Joy-Cons at a conceptual level are fine. They're not as comfortable as a regular controller, but they got some nice features. You know, the motion works most of the time. HD rumble is excessive and unnecessary, but cool to have in the right moments. And the separation means that you can play games like this, which you can't do with a regular controller. And it's nice that you can just plug them onto the console in portable mode to turn it into a big Game Boy that can play Metroid Prime. But unfortunately, all of that stuff goes out the window once they start drifting. I swear to God, man, these controllers are made out of pigeon bones and cardboard boxes that Reggie found in the McDonald's garbage can. Everybody I know, the Joy-Cons are busted. It's like the red ring of death. Everybody got it, and if you didn't, you will. Eventually. The best way to play Switch games, in my opinion, is the Pro Controller, which is wonderful and expensive. It feels good, it feels hefty, it feels way more durable and solid than the PS4 controllers, which is great if you like to play games like Smash Bros, and in my year of using it, I have had no issues with it whatsoever. I even use that shit on my computer. I would ask them to bundle the Pro Controller by default, but that would inflate the price. And really, you know, if the next console is a Switch with more than 1 teraflop, my biggest hope for the Joy-Cons is that they don't break after 3 weeks, okay? I want to get at least 4 weeks out of these things, okay, Nintendo? Let's talk online. Now for Nintendo's sake, if nothing else, I am praying that the Nintendo Switch Online service in its current state is just carried over to the new console. When Switch Online first dropped, it was depressing and embarrassing. Nintendo finally decided that they liked making money and started charging extra for the online, just like Sony did with PS4 and like Microsoft did since day one, those son of a bitches. This service launched over a year after the console did, and for $20 a year, which to their credit was cheaper than the competition of course, you get online play, which was free on Wii U, and you get a drip feed of NES and Super Nintendo games of wildly varying quality. Basically all the games you already played the shit out of during the Virtual Console era. They didn't even drop Earthbound until 2022. That should have been day one. Day one, Nintendo. By that time, they announced a new, higher tier subscription that cost even more money. They called it the Expansion Pack. This one got you N64 and Sega Genesis games, which were also drip-fed for a while, but most of the ones you'd really want are on there now. Even stuff you wouldn't expect, like Banjo-Kazooie and GoldenEye. Still no Diddy Kong Racing or Banjo-Tooie, but it's not over yet. N64 games can be played online with your friends as long as the connection is decent, and you even get access to Mario Kart DLC and some Animal Crossing goodies. Of course, when I was subscribed to PS Plus 700 years ago, Sony would actually give you whole-ass games that actually came out during this generation. That's where I first played Borderlands 2 and Saints Row 3. There's no world where Nintendo is going to promote its online service by giving you a complimentary copy of even the oldest and least relevant Switch game because they know they can still get away with selling it for $60, but I do like Banjo-Kazooie. Today, the Nintendo Switch Online, much to my surprise, is way more worth the money, but goddamn, did it take a long time to get there. If the next Nintendo console comes out and the online is starting all the way from square zero again, that's gonna be a real slap in the face, and I will be a very sad man. What about the name? What is Nintendo gonna call this thing? Well, we all know that there's no way Nintendo is just gonna call it the Nintendo Switch 2, even if that's basically what it is, and even if that would be very easy to understand for the average consumer. With Nintendo, it just can't be that simple. The only video game company on Earth that actually knows how numbers work is Sony. PlayStation, PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5. Very straightforward and effective. It's a better version of the thing you bought 5 years ago, and you know that because the number is bigger. Super Nintendo Switch would be a fun name and a nice historical allusion. They definitely will not call it that, but if they did, I personally wouldn't care too much one way or another. They could call it the Switch Bitch and I'd be fine as long as it had the games that I want. And that's a good segue into the real issue, video games. Even if this new Switch is extremely powerful, has functioning Joy-Cons, has the best online service in the entire world, and has the most ingenious naming convention known to mankind, none of it matters unless you can actually put some worthwhile video games on there. One thing that I'm praying for is backwards compatibility with the entire Switch library. This whole time, I've pretty much just been naturally assuming that the next console really is going to be a Switch 2 type deal based on the success of the original. So Nintendo would have to be really dumb not to have backwards compatibility with the sheer volume of games that are currently available on the Nintendo Switch, a lot of which are currently only available on that platform. Mario Odyssey, Mario RPG Remake, Mario Maker 2, New Super Mario Bros. U, Mario Bros. Wonder, Origami Bitch, Captain Toad, Mario 3D All-Stars, Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury, both Mario Rabbids games, Luigi's Mansion 3, Mario Kart, Mario Golf, Mario Party, Mario Tennis, Mario Strikers. That's just the Mario games. Metroid Prime Remaster, Metroid Dread, Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, Smash, Link's Awakening Remake, Animal Crossing, Xenoblade 2 and 3, Pikmin 1, 2, 3, and 4, Kirby and the Forgotten Land, Dreamland Deluxe, Bayonetta 2 and 3, Splatoon 2 and 3, Ring Fit Adventure, ARMS, Fire Emblem, 3 Houses, Fire Emblem, Engage, Pokemon Legends Arceus, Tetris 99, F-Zero 99, WarioWare, Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze, Hyrule Warriors, Skyward Sword HD, upcoming Princess Peach Showtime, Mario vs. Donkey Kong Remake, Luigi's Mansion 2 Remake, and Thousand Year Door Remake. The Switch has a remarkably high volume of games that speak to many different sensibilities and are not available on other current devices. Not to mention the avalanche of retro stuff you get with Switch Online. I would play most of the games I just mentioned in a heartbeat over any other console's exclusives. I'm sorry, Demon's Souls, but what can I say? You should have been a better video game. The Nintendo Switch is the closest thing we have to the ultimate Nintendo console in terms of content, and it's like 5 re-released GameCube games away from being the all-in-one destroyer of worlds for Nintendo fans. Not even to speak of the multi-plat games that they managed to bag on this thing. If the Switch 2 is going to be a PS5 situation where you get 3 years into the console's lifespan and there are like 4 games worth playing and 2 of them are still available on previous gen, to not have full backwards compatibility with the current Switch library would be a tragic mistake in my opinion. Remember, the PS5 can play every PS4 game right out of the gate, so even if you don't care about Alan Wake 2, you can still catch up on all the PS4 games you missed, like Alan Wake 1. It would also be nice if they retroactively added enhancements for the Switch games, like it detects that it's running on a Switch 2, and they can patch in graphics and frame rate upgrades, similar to how some PS4 games were enhanced when running on PS5. Again, Pikmin 4 with no pop-in and better detail distance, that would look like real life. I realize that it's easy for me to just say things like that, you know, I don't know all the technical logistics that implies obviously, but it would be very cool to have. Aside from being an easy console to understand, the Switch mostly had a really strong start because of how quick Nintendo was to actually put out quality titles for it. While it is true that some consoles have been known to make up for lost time down the road, like the PS3's legendary comeback arc, ideally you want to start strong to jumpstart the momentum going into the new generation. Compared to the Wii U, which launched with New Super Mario Bros. U and took a year to get a 3D Mario game that was like a bigger version of the 3DS game, and it took 5 years to get a big Zelda, the Switch gave you Mario Odyssey within months of launching, alongside better versions of Breath of the Wild and Mario Kart. Games that only the 17 people who owned a Wii U would have gotten to play otherwise. Immediately following up the Wii U was surprisingly advantageous for the Switch because the Wii U had a great library of games and Star Fox Zero, but only the few people who owned the console were allowed to play those games, so the Switch got a ton of excellent hand-me-down titles that were privileged enough to get a second wind on a much bigger install base. The Switch 2 doesn't really have that advantage because everyone owns a Switch 1 and has access to all of its great games already. Even if it does get all the Switch games one way or another, it's not as special because everybody got to play them already. I have to imagine they know they can't sell the Switch 2 if there aren't any games worth buying for it that are not also available on the current Switch platform, which actually gets me really excited about whatever they might be planning to launch with it. It's purely conjecture at this point, but I feel like they must have at least one unknown ace up their sleeve to legitimize this thing, some big boy title that we still don't know anything about, and the idea of that gets me excited. If Nintendo is smart, the next Switch launches with a big 3D Mario, or at the very least the promise of a big 3D Mario right around the corner. That to me is the kind of game you need to legitimize a new Nintendo console in the short term. And unless you count Bowser's Fury, it'll be 7 years since Odyssey, which is the longest interval without an all-new big dog 3D Mario game. Pretty much that or something of that magnitude is the only thing that could get me to buy the Switch 2 day one. The only other thing I could think of would be a new 3D Zelda, which is very unlikely considering Tears of the Kingdom came out last year. Metroid Prime 4, which is not likely but also not impossible. Maybe some drastic nuclear option like a remake of Mother 3, which I don't even think I should joke about that. Or Donkey Kong vs. the Gay Beaver. I got a good feeling about this one. When all is said and done, the Switch 2 will be remembered for the games that are on it above everything else. The console's power can definitely enable games to be better, and a controller that doesn't drift after 3 weeks can make an experience that is less frustrating. But in the end, it will be the console's library that saves it, and nothing else can really compensate for that. It would definitely be good for my wallet if there wasn't any reason to buy the next Nintendo Switch day one. But for some reason, it's always nice to see Nintendo doing well, you know? It's one of the few things that's kinda constant. Even in their darkest hours, they've still put out things that are worthwhile. There's usually a Nintendo Direct in February, so maybe we'll hear something there, and hopefully it's all good news, and if not, I guess I can always go back to Earthworm Jim 3D.